Welcome and thank you for downloading the Tailoring Talk podcast. I'm your host, Roberto Revilla. We're recording on Sunday, the 11th of July, 2021, and England are in the cup final. So there is a bit of a fiesta mood up and down the country today. If you hear any cars honking in the background, I apologise, but it's been happening all day. Such fun. This is episode 14 and I'm joined by a fellow podcaster today all the way from Slovakia by way of Malaysia and Hong Kong. A psychology major who then reset and adjusted his career path to go back to school and pursue his passion for dance. He's since been a performing dancer for the Divadlo Studio Tanca in Slovakia, a producer, and more recently he started a fantastic podcast called The Background Dancer. The Background Dancer is an absorbing listen combining performing arts with entrepreneurship. It's set to change the game for dancers worldwide when it comes to post-performance careers. Jason Yap, welcome to Tailoring Talk and thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
Well, that is such a sensational introduction. My gosh, thank you so much for that. Yeah, I am great. I am a fan of England as well. So yeah, I'm delighted they are finally in a major finals after such a long time. But just all in all, great to see you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I guess I'm kind of excited. I mean, we've had so many years of disappointment because the English football team is, I think the closest they may have made a semi-final, and then mostly they get to like the second round or the quarterfinals, and then they bottle it, as we say over here. So I'm kind of excited for this evening. We've already ordered and this isn't because of you, it's just pure coincidence, but we've ordered a Malay-inspired dinner for this evening because recording, I haven't got time to cook. So I'm really looking forward to that as well, as long as the order doesn't get messed up. So yeah, look, the Background Dancer, it's really, I'm going to keep doing this, but I can't praise what you've done enough, really. Because I kind of thought, when we first got connected, I thought, I have a passion for dance, right? I love the performing arts. I studied drama and theatre arts for 3 years. I got a place at Rose Bruford in Leeds. I couldn't take that. We might get into that a bit later on. I couldn't take that up, and my career just went down a completely different path to where I really wanted to go. But from a tailoring talk and this podcast is an entrepreneurship kind of podcast. We also talk about a load of other nonsense as well. But I kind of wasn't sure until I started listening to The Background Dancer, and I've now subscribed. It's a 5-star podcast. Guys and girls listening, really, go find it on iTunes. I was going to save this to the end. I'm going to repeat it at the end, but go find it on iTunes or Spotify or wherever you like to get your shows and hit subscribe. If you have got any interest in performing arts, but you have also got a passing interest or a great interest in entrepreneurship and business, the principles of business are the same no matter what you do pretty much. And this is just, it's just such a great immersive listen. So well done you. And I really just thank you for producing such an amazing podcast, really. How's the last 2 months of podcasting been for you?
Oh, thank you so much for that, Roberto. I really appreciate it. And yeah, it was a great coming together of sorts, with regards to the podcast and how I found my way into a very special niche, actually, of talking about dance except for dance, right? Talking about everything regarding dance except for the one thing the dance is mostly about, which is performing. So that's what my podcast is about. The last 2 months have been quite good, I would say, normal. But, since we're approaching the summer, things are getting a little bit more frenzied. I think that's a good way to put it because, all the activities are popping back up, and back, I think when we started podcasting, we were just like, okay, there's nothing better to do right now, so let's do it. And then now it's just more like, gosh, okay, how am I going to fit this, with my normal job and many other incoming and upcoming interests, so that's a good challenge. But I would say, like you and me, hopefully we have the only constant that will never change is the fact that we'll keep podcasting, because it's such a wonderful medium to connect with the rest of the world. And apart from my interest in dance and all that, it is actually this particular reason why I wanted to podcast.
Are you finding, how many episodes in are you now? 19, 20?
Yep, 19. 19 was my last one.
You're a few episodes ahead from me. I took a break at the end of April. No, was it beginning of April? Whenever. End of March, I took a break, and then I came back sort of early May. And I just found I was exhausted. And I think it's just that initially it's not something I'd ever done before. You hadn't done it before either. And so you're kind of learning these things all the way, and you don't really have anyone to show you what to do. I am on another podcast, a pop culture sort of podcast, where we review, sort of books and films and movies, and I'm a geek. So I did get some tips from my friends and my co-hosts there. But yeah, I mean, this is just a completely new thing. And, some of my friends were actually shocked, because they were sort of saying, look, I wasn't expecting you to produce such great quality work. I don't know if you've had the same feedback as well.
Yeah.
And then you tell them what's involved, and you explain that you do the recording, and then you have to edit, and maybe I was kind of editing a bit too much, but episodes were taking anywhere between 12 working hours to a few days, or sometimes I'd be working on editing one episode for a whole week. But I mean, I've managed to streamline all of that now as you learn as you go along. But nearly 20 episodes in, I mean, you've had such a great range of guests. And how are you... are you keeping a lot of those people as connections? Are they people that you already know from your industry? Tell me a bit more about the guests that you've had so far, and also any that have stood out for you.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think when you're starting out, you have you would have this beggars can't choose mentality, where you just kind of refer back to your existing contacts. And thankfully over the years I have built a good reservoir of contacts, let's say. And it is very interesting, because when I started the podcast, I had a very strict or very disciplined framework as to how I would approach it. So, you've heard it. It consists of multiple categories that revolve around dance. And I personally have an interest in all of these different categories. So throughout my years studying in Hong Kong, and even before that, really building up, the contact list, my network, of course, I know quite a number of people. But then when I maybe arrive at a point where, okay, this particular topic, I do not have such, a broad understanding of, then I just have to go to the god of information right now, which is Google, right? And just look people up, Instagram. And there are a couple of them that I actually came across just by doing research, just by having algorithms feed me information that they are already, having, tracking, and all these kinds of things. But definitely the ones that I enjoyed most so far have been actually a combination of both, like the ones that I already knew from a long time ago, because then you had the chance to really deepen that relationship, the understanding. And then the other one is like, oh, what a surprise, what a great guest, what value, so it's a very good combination of both. And I'm thankful so far that all of the guests that I have been very eager to be part of the show as well. It's not just like a one-way transaction. It's a very mutually beneficial relationship. And I can see that also for both of us.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny, we've got a parallel between our two podcasts, because, I'm tailoring talk, you're the background dancer. But the percentage of talk about tailoring on my podcast is very small compared to all the other things that we tend to cover. And I guess it's maybe not to such a great extent, because everything that you talk about on each episode is directly related to your industry in one way, shape, or form. So we've kind of got that in common. Do you know there was I think it was about 3 episodes ago, one episode you did with Erin Pride, the dancerpreneur or dance entrepreneur. Yeah. The thing that smacked me is that when you look at the principles and the fundamentals of business, they're pretty much the same, whatever industry you're in. We're all selling something. We've all got some sort of product. In my case, obviously, it's clothing and it's image, and it's time saving. Obviously, in your business, it's your talent, your God-given natural talent for dance and for interpretation through your body. And you're amazing, by the way. I've seen some of your competition dances and finals and stuff, and you're absolutely amazing. So can you tell I'm really excited? I've also I went cycling this morning, and I found Richmond Park for the first time, which is weird. I mean, as a cyclist, I found it for the first time. I've obviously been there before as a normal person, but you know, London's parks are absolutely incredible. But I kind of just left at 6:00 this morning, and I didn't have a plan. I was just kind of, let's just see where things take me. And I had a bunch of podcasts lined up that I wanted to listen to this morning. And then eventually I ended up sort of towards southwest London, and I thought, while I'm down here, I saw the signs for Richmond. I might as well. Richmond's very famous for being extremely big, and it's got loads of deer in there. There's like a herd of deer that have lived there for centuries. And I thought, while I'm down here, I might as well go find Richmond Park, because I've never been there before on my bike. And about 5 cemeteries later, is this Richmond Park? Is this Richmond Park? Is this Richmond Park? No. Eventually, I found Richmond Park. It is absolutely massive. And I ended up kind of getting lost in there and cycling twice as much distance as I should have done. And then couple that with about 7 espressos today. And then talking to you, I'm just sort of on the ceiling. And then England being in the final tonight. Such a great day. Sorry, anyway. So fundamentals of business, that's where I was. So in my industry, people generally go work for a larger firm. So apply that to your industry. You start performing for a company, a dance company. And then eventually people split into 2 categories. Either they're employees or they're entrepreneurs. So Erin was talking about that, you know, she always knew that she had that spirit within her, and that one day she was going to go and do something for herself. And that's what she's doing now. With the dance, is it Dancepreneur or Dance Entrepreneur Academy? I can't pronounce it.
Well, yeah, it's absolutely the combination of the both. So it's dance entrepreneur. So she made it into dancerpreneur. So just take out the tr.
Dancerpreneur. The Dancerpreneur Academy. Yeah, now it makes sense. And she's doing great with that. But one thing that we're certainly not taught, and I'm guessing it's the same for dancers as well, is you're not taught the fundamentals of business. So you almost go into dance hoping that you're going to be successful and you're going to have a career and you're going to be able to perform and you're going to keep getting work. But at some point it's going to end, as it does for all of us. But then for dancers specifically, it's kind of then I'm guessing they're not taught, or you're not taught, what happens when it does come to an end, when physically you can't do it anymore, or you're not booking work and suddenly you've got to go find the next thing.
Absolutely. I mean, Erin illustrated the whole industry in its most cruel reality very, very eloquently in that episode, where, you know, she said that, okay, she did not learn the fundamentals of business in her degree, in her master's. And it's the same. I have had multiple conversations with many people, and it's just basically, I think, a bit of a short-sightedness from the industry itself, knowing, or I think it's maybe too much of an idealism, where everybody who goes into a dance degree or an education is expected to first become a performer. And even if you're an educator, which is probably the second most popular profession after performing, you're just sort of being paid, once again, as you've already mentioned, being affiliated with a larger company. Now, very few have that courage, firstly, and then the ability to be a self-made person, right? A self-made talent. And even if you're a freelance artist, a lot of artists do not like to handle that part of the job. So what they would do is they outsource that part of the job to a producer or to a project manager to do so. And then they could sort of just concentrate on creating. So for someone like Erin, she has had to, and also me to many regards, like we've had to arrive at a very frustrating point in our lives where we know deep down in ourselves that we have an overwhelming capability to do something, but very underwhelming circumstances. So we've had to go and cross that line, push the boundaries, and find how we can basically marry the two. And for her, I would say, she probably did not say this in the episode, but it was a long journey for her to get to where she is right now, right? From maybe just a couple of $100 a month in revenue and income to about 8K as one person. And she's doing mostly an online business. So without a brick and mortar service as well. And of course, all of this is in America, but it's definitely replicable across the world. So for me, it speaks a lot to why the industry has not moved forward for a very, very long time, because we've basically adopted the same principles that were used maybe 20, 30 years ago, thinking that they're still applicable now. And someone like Erin, who has a little bit more prescience in that sense, has already taken the next step. And I feel, yes, when I interviewed her, the first thing I felt for myself was, thank God, I've come across this person, because I did not know online business for the art of dance could exist in this manner. I know people have been doing online businesses forever, but it's very, let's say, uncommon for dance to be approached in this way. Once again, we always go back to, can you get a job as a performer? If you can't, go and teach. And that's about it. And yeah, if you want to open a business about shoes or costumes or whatever, do your thing. But online business performance coaching, wow, that is something different. And I'm pretty sure it's been around for a long time, but it's not really mainstream yet. And just as presented within the episode, it could be such a favorable career path, actually, if one puts their heart and soul into it. And that's what Erin has demonstrated, I believe.
Yeah. But I think what your industry needs, and it's certainly the same for a lot of other industries, mine included, is to break out of these cliques that these people tend to be quite insular. They tend to be in their own little groups of networks and so on, and it's very dog eats dog. So when even the thought of helping someone else is not second nature to people in the performing arts industry, as it is again in many other areas as well. And what's refreshing is to see people like you and Erin and a lot of other people within your network that are now appearing on your show. You're obviously on this journey for yourselves, but you're also thinking outward to the rest of your industry and to dancers, young up and coming dancers, or even people who aren't even there yet. They're probably, I really hope you've got a lot of younger listeners as well who are maybe in their early teens that are kind of going through that sort of rise through to hopefully one day becoming a professional dancer. But you're actually thinking about how you can help these people and give them the preparation that you guys certainly never had, and that they're still probably, because the industry's stuck, are not going to get without people like you, Erin, et al.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's basically it. It definitely originated from my own personal frustrations, that I was at a point where I could have been one of those people extremely lost, not having the job that I have right now. I'm incredibly fortunate to have this job, but I could have been anyone else. And it's, all my brethrens in dance, right? Like, I see them, right? I communicate with them, and they, of course, most recently with the pandemic and all that, all of these struggles have been heightened, right? Like, they were not prepared for this. They did not have anything in their arsenal to take the next step, and they're all young people. Like you've mentioned, the majority of my listeners are between the age of 18 to 30. And this age group is honestly the most critical group in the industry. They are the ones that move the industry forward, either as a performer or not. But once again, that, when you talk about dance, nobody goes into dance thinking they want to become a dance teacher or a dance entrepreneur. Everyone wants to dance, including me. However, the reality is, how many of those people actually get to realize it when they do graduate from a degree or whatever? It's minimal. It's really minimal. So, I wanted to provide that part of the industry, a gaping hole of saying, yes, from a very young age, you can already imagine what else you can do. So yeah, it's wonderful that someone like you acknowledges that, even not coming from the dance industry, which is wonderful, even better even.
So yeah, no, I mean, look, it's not even just about acknowledging what you're doing. Listening to a few episodes already, I'm going to go and start again from the beginning and follow through, because I run my own business. I wear pretty much every single hat that you can in a small to medium sized business. I mean, our accountant who does our audit every year is absolutely amazed at the amount of work that me and my wife actually do. But I mean, that's what happens when you're the son of immigrant Asian parents, right? I mean, I was put to work the moment I could talk and walk, crawl even. But I just get so much out of it. And this is why I can't recommend your podcast enough to anyone who is in business, is looking to go into business for themselves, or is an entrepreneur. Because the lessons that you get out of the conversations with every single one of your guests are so valuable and so applicable. But also, it's a really refreshing take, because there are so many business and entrepreneurship podcasts out there, but they all kind of sound a bit samey after a while. And also, they're very self-serving, whereas yours isn't that. You're coming at it from a point of view of trying to help other people. Yeah. And whether that was intentional, I think now, having got to know you, that was intentional from the beginning. And so, acknowledgement it's not just mere acknowledgement. It's, I'm a loyal fan, and I'm sure all your other listeners are. Anyway, sorry, I digress. So you were talking about graduation there, and I actually really, you've probably told this story like 500 times, but I'm really interested in how you got to dance, because I was doing the maths in my head, and I've kind of worked out. So I work for a couple of dancers who are on Strictly Come Dancing here in the UK, and when they get quite far in the competition, then their little show reel shows, them dancing as little people when they're like 6 years old in some ballroom competition, or doing ballet when they're 3. And that wasn't you. So you've come to dance quite, well, I say late in life, you're still very young, but you originally wanted to be a basketball coach, right? When you were growing up.
Wow, yeah, that's a great piece of information. I do not know how you found that out, but that is definitely a fact.
You'd be surprised what I can find out about people.
That is a fact that I talk a lot about in other maybe interviews or podcast episodes that I've been on myself. That's only because I played a lot of basketball growing up. So, I like the idea of managing. I like the idea of coaching. I really love developing people and myself. So I guess the natural course of action was to become a coach. And I did not get to study dance immediately after I graduated from high school. I started dance just before I graduated from high school. So I use this analogy quite often. So when you are going into an academic institution at the tertiary educational level, most of the time, people can get into those educational institutions, bar like the Cambridges and all these, what do you call them again? I forgot what's the name, but
the fancy
the Ivy League, the Ivy
they call them
Leagues,
where I
yes.
come from.
So unless it's the Ivy Leagues,
Yeah.
most of the time you probably stand a chance to get into those institutions because you've had your whole life to prepare for it, right? So every single transcript that you have accumulated across the years can be used in some ways to gain entry. However, just like you and me, you're also in Rose Bruford and mine in Hong Kong. If you want to gain entry into an art academy, you need to know how to do the art in the first place. So unless you have some inborn incredible talent to pick up the art in like a couple of years to gain entry, then fine, great for you. But the majority of us do not have that talent. So I myself wasn't able to do that on first try. So I wanted to audition for a number of institutions, couldn't get in because I was just not good enough, just horrible at it. I just did not have enough preparation or training at the time. So I had to go into a degree first. So I chose psychology because I always thought that it was very interesting. It was very artistic in the way it was all about the human mind, and I love the human mind. So that allowed me to first appease my Asian parents, as you know, and sort of, okay, settle down, everybody. I'm going to finish this by hook or by crook. But at the same time, I kept dancing because I never truly gave up on that dream. I always had it sort of in my back pocket, thinking that this could potentially be a way out in the future or even become eventually my profession. So there were many, many junctures throughout my studies in psychology where I wanted to give up dance, but thankfully that did not happen. I think it's a combination of resilience, but also luck. And after that, I was able to formally pursue it as a degree, actually, when I got the chance to do it, because they finally accepted me. So I auditioned and I was good enough at the time because I already trained for a couple more years, right? And really, that was just my dream. I never really wanted to do professional dancing. I just want to study dance, like have that environment where you wake up every single day and go, the one thing I'm going to do is the one thing I love most. And how many people get to say that, right? So studying that was a dream. So I did that for 4 years, and I realized that if you're going to put your heart and soul into something, you might as well do it for a job as well. So, natural course of action, next step was can you do it as a job? At the next level, at that level, survival level. And that's what got me to Slovakia, which I am in right now. And honestly, the job that I have right now, a lot of people would want because it is a full-time employing job, which means you get social health benefits. And that is crazily rare. Most dancers have to settle for a freelancer's job, but I have the backing of the institution and the backing of the government, in fact. So that's really great. Never thought this would ever happen. Nothing in my wildest imagination could have landed me at this spot. But really, I think it's really a combination, once again, of that luck and also putting yourself in the positions to succeed. So yeah, and just to touch a little bit on the podcasting side, so definitely it was my intention to help everyone. And the funny thing is that when I designed the framework of the podcast, my initial intention was not to educate people about dance. It was mostly to sort of approach people from outside of dance. So people like you, and invite them within the dance industry through other means. Yeah, so I talk about things from technology to fashion to business to management to politics to education. And if you're not really interested in dance, you might be still interested in it via this different medium or different topic. Of course, most of them have to do with the dance industry to some extent, but you don't necessarily have to be a performer to like what I talk about, because it's just not about that anymore. So, and I think it's working quite well, because literally there are people who come up to me and go like, I don't know anything about dance, but geez, like I can resonate with you just because you talked about my particular industry. It's like, yeah, the person was a tech guy. It's like, okay, that's interesting. Or the person was from fashion. It's like, wow, okay. So yeah, really, once again, just to open up the mind, no, tunnel visioning is good. Tunnel visioning is really, really good. But yeah, open up the mind.
I think the thing is that the struggles are the same for a lot of people. Like, they might not be identical, but, the kind of struggles are kind of the same. I mean, for all intents and purposes, I'm not employed. For all intents and purposes, I'm a freelancer. The people who employ me are my clients, but they're not. It's really hard to describe, right? If someone's not commissioning me for new clothes or to help them with some clothing related problem, I have no work. So when the pandemic hit, and then suddenly we couldn't move around anymore and we had to stay at home, and then companies had all their employees working from home. So all of a sudden my clients didn't need to wear anything more than a pair of, well, probably they didn't wear anything. They were just wearing their underpants, just, get out of bed, go sit at the desk with whatever they were wearing, don't bother getting dressed. That's it. So a lot of people have had their suits sitting in the wardrobe for 18 months, and people haven't been able to go to weddings, they've not been able to go to events, they've not been traveling. So suddenly I've got no income. So, again, you translate that to try and keep things relevant back to someone who's in the performing arts, because that has been a huge problem, even to this day. I mean, hopefully theatres will be opening up soon, although 19th of July is when all of the restrictions are meant to be ending over here. But there's already talk that there could be an announcement on Monday that they might put it back a little bit further because cases have been going up again. And for people in the performing arts, I mean, Andrew Lloyd Webber was sort of big in the news recently because he basically said, come hell or high water, if they extend restrictions, he's threatening to basically ignore and to go ahead. And I think it's Cinderella is his new West End show. He's going to go ahead and just launch and hang the consequences. And some people have criticised him for being irresponsible, and people like me are like, do you know what? Fair enough. Like I've had enough of my income, my livelihood being bounced around, and all the excess stress that puts onto an individual and to families and so on. For a lot of people who are in theatre, acting and so on, where theatres have been shut down, I mean, they're either just kind of sitting doing nothing, or they're trying to turn their hand to something else in the meantime. Some are a lot actually in the industry are actually giving up and trying to pursue other career options. It's just awful. So I have no idea where I'm actually going right now.
Yeah, I mean, just to add on to that, like it's the pain, right? Like people experience struggle and pain at very different levels. And alluding to your point, one of the biggest performing arts centers in my country, Malaysia, is soon to be shut down because we've been in lockdown for more than a year. And how is that even possible? They employ at least 50 people in that center, and everybody is probably going to be transitioned into either a contract-based thing from a full-time employment, or basically the whole thing is going to shut down, like retrenchment, right? So it's hard for people to understand, because at the very end of the day, we all know when we have this food pyramid thing. I like to allude to Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the psychological tenet that
yes,
arts is really, really at the top end. It's reserved for luxury and leisure, and it's hard to understand. It's not at the bottom where you can access it quite easily, and it's not needed. It's just not essential, so people can go, let that shut down or whatever. And Andrew, with all respect to him, I can feel his pain just like you and I, and I don't know when things are ever going to change, where we will come to a point where arts is so needed for various reasons. I mean, it is needed. Everybody knows it is needed. Yeah, everybody knows this, but it's just needed. Not in the policy.
Yeah. So take the Euros, right? So Euro 2020, I think it's still called Euro 2020 yes, because it was meant to be last year, and because of all the marketing, they'd spent so much money on the merchandising and the branding and stuff of it, that to then call it Euro 2021 meant a load of t-shirts were going to go in the bin. But, the Euros now, and especially in this country, with England having got to the final, which never happens or hasn't happened for 55 years, it's just captured the imagination of the entire country. And then obviously we had Wimbledon and the tennis going on in the background as well. But, I mean, we've had car horns going off all day. People have been out with England flags as capes and flying from their cars and stuff. Now, some might argue that football is not an art form. It's a sport. I mean, they do call it the beautiful game for a reason. But it's been missing from our lives, right? I mean, look, football was going on, but crowds weren't allowed at matches. The difference between watching a football match with no crowd, in which case most of us, like myself included, just gave up watching football because even though it was televised, there was just no atmosphere, just kind of sucked the life out of it, not having people in the stadium, to all of a sudden seeing semi to full stadiums of people cheering and happy and getting drunk and smashing things up, which is what, again, we tend to do over here, has just been fantastic to see after 18 months of that missing from our lives. And now the next thing, so I think Maslow really needed an alternative hierarchy of needs, right? Because you have your hierarchy of needs, which is what you need to do to basically survive, just as an organism. But then you have a hierarchy of needs of which the arts and being inspired and your imagination captured, that has been missing. I cannot wait to get back into a theatre. I cannot wait to see some of our favourite dance companies come back to the UK and put shows on, and to be sat there as far front as I can get in a theatre so that I can watch what these amazing people do. That has been missing from our lives. And anyone who says that they could go the rest of their lives not going to a theatre or a cinema or going to see a music concert or something ever again, I do not understand them.
Yes. I don't know. Have you heard of this? Another analogy once again, right? So a lot of people say they like to drink, they like to party, they like to drive, they like to watch football matches, and they like to watch dance shows or musicals. And I beg to differ. I propose something completely different, which is none of these people like to do any of these things. They just need that to be with other people. Right, so it's the socialization.
Yeah, because how many times have you heard, at the end of a long day or something, you've been with a colleague and they go, actually, let's just not go home just yet. I need a drink.
Yeah, exactly. Right, so maybe...
Or I need to do this. Exactly. I need to do that. You need to let your hair down.
So, I mean, subset.
I don't want to.
There's a small subset of people who, for example, love the game so much, like football, and love dance so much like me, that I don't even need anyone else in order to appreciate it. Like, I do study football that way. However, that is not the masses, and that's why you can garner up 50, 60,000 people overnight to go to stadiums, because they want to be part of that, and also for theaters for sure. So yeah, that's just the reality of it.
One of my friends, his brother has a ticket for the final, and someone offered him £10,000 to give it up. And he refused. It wasn't even in his mind. It was not even a conversation. He was like, I am not going to miss being in Wembley Stadium for this event for any amount of money. Now, if it was me, I actually would have a price, because I'd quite happily go watch it on TV at home.
Exactly.
But that's just me. But then that's it. He's probably a professional person with a steady salary, and he's not been affected the last 18 months. People like me and you would be like, how much?
Yep. How much? 10,000. God, that's going to feed me for a couple of months.
Yeah, take it. You can, exactly. That's it. But that's the thing, right? So, I've got one of my clients who was on Strictly. I know. And look, nobody quote me on this. These are just things that I've picked up generally, and I'm not going to name who it is. People will probably work it out from my social media anyway. But they were on Strictly for a number of seasons, and then I think they found out that they were being relegated to background dancer, so they were kind of being elbowed sort of out. But they weren't told directly, which is kind of a typical BBC thing. And so his last season on the show as a main dancer was kind of bittersweet because he loves it there. It's like a big family, right? And the professional dancers are doing what they love to do, which is to A, dance, and B, teach, especially teaching someone who doesn't, in most celebrity cases, have a dance background. I would be one of those if ever I was famous enough one day to then be invited onto Strictly. I would go out in the first week, because if my wife was here, she'd tell you a tree has got more hip action than I have.
Oh, I love the jokes. Oh my gosh.
We went to Cuba one Christmas it was probably about 10 years ago, a couple of years after we were married. Might even have been, I can't remember, whatever. Anyway, it was a while ago. And we were on a resort and a hurricane hit the islands. So we had to stay in quite a large amount of the time. And so the staff were trying to find activities for us to do. On one of the days, they decided to put on dance lessons, so Cuban salsa. And my wife, she's got moves, she's got natural rhythm. And so we signed up for it. So we're standing there in the line, and I was the only person who looks like me, so sort of tall, dark, no hair. They couldn't quite place where I was from. And I'd very jokingly earlier in the week, when they'd said, "Where are you from?" And I was like, "Oh, from Cuba, but I managed to escape." But I said it as a joke. But they took it seriously. Because obviously the difference is when you're from different countries and so on, the nuances in accent, another English speaker would have got it, but someone who's not. So anyway, so they thought I was one of them. Maybe I'd escaped when I was a small child or something. So anyway, so they're all kind of nudging themselves and looking at me, and they're like, "We're really glad that you're here today. You're going to be so good at this. You're really going to enjoy it." Because obviously Cubans have, like Brazilians, they've got natural rhythm. So they started the music and they started to do the first few steps, right? And so me and my wife my wife was doing it, and then she was kind of dragging me around the dance floor. And then we just looked, and then they stopped the music, and they were all kind of in a huddle talking to each other. And then they turned around and they said, "You're not Cuban."
Oh, blimey, now you realize
completely
that.
Deadpan.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, I digress. So look, I can't dance for a toffee. So anyway, I was talking about my Strictly person. So I think for Strictly, for a season, they get paid about 100,000 for doing that show, which is, it's a decent year's salary, right? And where we see those people, and when you look at professional dance companies that come over here and put shows on at places like the Royal Opera House and so on, the lead dancers are famous. I mean, they're celebrities. But I think the problem is that people associate the word celebrity with having lots of money and not worrying about anything. And I learned firsthand from my friend stroke client that is not the case. Because when that came to an end, all of a sudden, he had some work afterwards, because obviously Strictly ends on TV and then they have the kind of live tour and that sort of thing. But then it was like, I don't know what I'm doing next after this, because this has ended and it doesn't look like there's going to be any way back. So what do I do now? And that must be quite a scary thing. But then again, we talked about this before, but no one's addressed that before, which is what you're trying to do now. Because would you say this is the single most pressing issue in your industry?
Yeah, for sure, yes. I would believe that particular person could immediately just get another job even before, quicker than it would take for you to leave a grocery shop to your car, because being so famous in the industry,
oh, absolutely,
you're gonna get a job. Yeah,
but as freelancers, we all have that fear.
We do. We do.
Right?
We have it, and it's a growing fear,
have that.
and it's there to stay. I think those kinds of fears, but honestly, that fear is what drives us forward as well, right? Like it drives us to be more creative, a little bit more engaging with whoever our audiences or our customers would be. There are always two sides to the coin. You know, when you have a job like mine, there's also the possibility of you just being completely complacent and not having any drive because you're always provided. And some of the most creative people I know in the world are mostly freelancers because they just have to do it to survive, you know, and I think that's wonderful. I do believe that everybody who has some sort of dance training, let's say, particularly for this conversation, everyone who has that kind of training can transfer the skills into another sector or industry very, very easily. That's just the nature of our training most of the time. We have very transferable skills. The only issue is whether the person is willing to transition him or herself. Because I can probably do something else right now. I just do not want to do it because I don't love it. And I think most of the time we're always driven by that as well. That's our motor, that emotional kind of cathartic need to be a dancer, to be a performer, to be providing, sharing that kind of experience for people, instead of maybe, for example, sitting behind a desk and managing an artist instead. Because I think many people could do that too, but that's not what they like. So it has been maybe relegated or shoved aside as sort of an afterthought. You know, careers like this has probably been labeled as it's imminent, right? It's soon to come. You're always going to get there at some point. So why don't you focus on dance first, worry about that later? Because at some point you have to do it anyways. But then for me, I rather have it simultaneously, you know, grow that awareness simultaneously, even if you could, equip yourself with those skills simultaneously. So when the day finally comes where either you break your leg, you know, or you just completely lose love for the art, which happens quite a lot as well, mental health issues and all that kinds of stuff, you have a gateway to another world. You have a gateway to another opportunity without having to sacrifice everything or compromise all of your previous training and last but not least your integrity as an artist. You know, so that's very, I think that's one of the shortcomings of our industry for sure, not just in dance, but across all genres within the performing arts. But like you said, you know, struggles that we face in this industry is shared by struggles everywhere else in the world. You know, one of my favorite quotes I always hear is like, the most personal struggles are the most universal struggles. And that's, couldn't be emphasized even more.
Do you envisage yourself in what does the future hold for you, do you think? So actually, in the immediate future, things are starting to open back up. So you said earlier that you're starting to get busier again, thankfully. What's the company working on right now? What are you producing right now?
So I'll be completely honest with you. My company is very much a traditional frameworked company. So we live and breathe within the theater, and if we could do live performances, that's what we're going to do. Hopefully tour a little bit around Europe, let's say, and just go back to normal. Now that's completely fine, and I cannot wait to do that. Personally though, I envisage something completely different or slightly different from what my company does, and that is, I think COVID, you probably agree with me, has taught us one too many lessons. And one of those lessons is do not underestimate the power of the internet, right? And not just that, do not even underestimate what's in the future for the internet. So one of the things that has probably propped up, you know, more often than not is the fact that you could, by hook or by crook, still appreciate art like football from a television set. And I think that could be the next frontier for the arts, where because of the threats that exist towards the arts, we have to maybe apply a hybrid, a sort of a hybrid approach, where you can go to the theater to watch your stuff, but everyone else in the world who cannot attend that live gets to attend it elsewhere, just like a football match, but it's always done black or white.
Well, I don't know if they do it so much, but they've been doing it for a while over here, pre-COVID anyway. So View Cinemas over here regularly put on performances of big shows like Les Mis, and, you know, if there's a particular dance company that's coming over here, or a theatre company that's coming over here to put a production on, they, like the National Theatre, for example, a lot of National Theatre shows, you can actually buy a ticket and go sit in the comfort of a cinema and watch it there if you can't actually get to the theatre. I personally haven't done it. Sky Arts, throughout the pandemic, they have shown live theatre. So I guess the performers were in an empty theatre and then obviously being filmed and broadcast live out. And we tried to do some of those, but it's not the same as actually being there.
Exactly. Yeah.
It just isn't the same. I totally agree with you. I'm not disagreeing with your point, but it just isn't the same. And I know, you know, times are changing and humans evolve and all of that sort of stuff. But I was talking about this the other day with a client, because we were, you know, he was saying that there's obviously going to be a fundamental change in the way that we work and whether people working in an office or not and so on. And I said to him, there will be a change, yes, but COVID hasn't been around long enough to cause a fundamental change in human behavior. Human behavioral change comes when you have a generation or two pass. That's what it takes to have fundamental change. And so I firmly believe that, you know, in a generation or two, we probably will have very few offices and people will be working wherever and working from home and, you know, wearing sportswear and all this other horrible stuff. But because the generation that's growing up now, they live on devices, right? So one of my clients early on in the pandemic, about 6 months in, he's got a 3-year-old, and I said to him, "Hey, how's your little one doing? Are they oblivious to it?" And he said, the interesting thing is they do so much on an iPad these days that he was looking out the window one day and there were cars going past and he kept hitting the glass, like trying to interact with it.
God.
Now, I don't know if that's happened to anyone else or if it's just this one kid, which then, you know, maybe raises some questions about parenting skills and that sort of thing. I really hope this guy doesn't listen to this podcast, otherwise I've lost a customer. But the greater point was, generationally, you know, certainly, you know, my age, when I was a kid, we didn't have all of this stuff. You know, if you wanted to use the phone, didn't have a mobile phone until I was about 18, 19 years old. Before that, it was a case of having to use the phone at home, you know, and then you're basically dragging the receiver with the long telephone cord and stretching it out and shutting yourself into a cupboard door so your mum and dad can't hear your conversation because you're trying to ring some girl that you fancy. And then you hear your mum breathing on the other line upstairs. You know, all of that stuff, you know.
I've been there.
You know, when we wanted to watch TV, we only had 5 channels unless you were rich enough to have cable TV. And then when you wanted to entertain yourself at weekends, basically you just go out with your friends and just go to the park and, you know, someone would bring a ball or a cricket bat and pads and that sort of stuff. We just didn't do as much as kids and even adults actually do these days on electronic devices. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So then when you translate that back to entertainment, yeah, you're probably 100% right. It's going to go that way to an extent, but I would really hate for us to get to a point in human future where live performance is no longer a thing. That's just awful, really. That's a dystopian future I don't even want to think about.
True. I guess the thing that I can say is technology will definitely not be able to provide us with the exact same experience, but what technology could possibly do is minimize the differences between what's real and what's alternate, right? So maybe what we like to call now an immersive experience, you know, how close can you get to the actual live event? I think that's maybe the next frontier for us, consciously knowing that it's not the same. But it does provide an option for people who cannot get the very best. Because as you know, as much as we want to be in the theaters, 90% of people cannot afford to be in those theaters in the first place anyways, right? But they can afford to be behind the computer screen on a rundown 10-year-old laptop, let's say.
I remember my mother-in-law was coming over from Spain to visit, and my wife said, "Oh, go and get tickets at the Royal Opera House because the Nutcracker, I think, was on or something." Or was it Swan? Is it Swan Lake?
Yeah.
The one with all the swans?
That's going to cost like £100 or something.
Obviously.
Like that, like £200 or something.
Are you kidding? I wish.
Yeah, it's more. Oh my gosh.
It was, I remember, and this was like 10 years ago, God. Right? It was, it was more than 10 years ago because I think we'd got engaged, but we hadn't told them. And I wanted to impress them. And they love the Royal Opera House in Covent Garden. They absolutely love that place. It's one of their favourite venues to visit when they're here. And so I wanted to impress them. We just got engaged. We hadn't told them. I remember it costing somewhere for the four of us, somewhere in the region of 1,200 quid.
My goodness.
So what's that? About 300 a ticket? That's
Pounds.
Crazy. Yeah, and I'll admit, I love live performance and I love art and dance and everything. But really, I was getting so fidgety during that one.
To see that fly out of your wallet.
It was kind of
on one night.
Boring.
One night.
Yeah. And that's not even including everything that you do before and after. You go and get pre-theatre drinks or pre-theatre dinner, or you might do dinner art, but it doesn't matter. And then, dinner in central London, if you go to a half-decent place, if you're trying to impress people, is £100 a head. So... you've blown the best part of $2,000 for 4 people. It's crazy. So you're absolutely right. I take back some of what I said. Technology definitely has its place, and definitely has its place in making things more accessible to a much wider audience, and we should see that as a positive thing.
Absolutely.
For sure. Yeah. Wow. And so your podcast is starting to evolve and starting to find its own identity. I'm not even sure mine is yet.
Maybe this is the identity.
Started off as tailoring. Well, like the early episodes up to about episode 7, it was like Welcome to Tailoring Tech and Talk, because originally it was meant to be like a 3-segment show, right? Tailoring for 20 minutes, and then talk about technology for 20 minutes, and then talk to someone for 20 minutes. And it's just become a talk show, which is fine. It's great. And it's even better for me because I get to meet some amazing people like you, and I just get to learn so much and make some wonderful connections as well. So, how do you feel it's taking shape and especially in relation to your kind of this new mission statement that you have? Or that I've given you inadvertently. I don't know which one it is.
Great introduction. That could be the next mission statement. So I might need to text you so you can send me that one, because I might just do.
I'll WhatsApp it to you. I've got it written down.
Yeah.
Wait, you haven't heard my outro yet.
Okay, I'll look forward to that one. I started the podcast very strictly just to provide people with enough information, hopefully valuable information for career advice driven stuff, right? So I wanted people to have an outlet or a platform to go to in order to learn about what careers are out there as a dancer. So everything that I ask on my show, as you've probably heard already, is really just to get the best out of that. The most valuable piece of information that could lead somebody to choose a particular career if it's not performance. As I go along, I realized that firstly, I enjoy my episodes more than probably everyone does, just as probably as you just said, like you love what you do. You're trying to give it to the audience, but like, man, like I could listen back to all those episodes myself 100 times because I'm learning so much out of all my guests, right? And the one thing that I learn more about or most about compared to, let's say, the valuable information of which career and how to get there is just their stories. Their stories are so interesting.
Yeah.
So I would say the next step for me is learning how to put that two together. Like, I mean, I'm already doing it to a certain extent, but really even sort of elevating my game up to the point where, yeah, you're listening to an actual storybook that gives you career advice at the same time. That would be really great. Yeah, it would be something like on Audible or something like that. So yeah, that would be my next step.
You even published, as well as a book, a collection of inspired stories, right? I could see that as well, definitely. And you're so early in, and you've done so much already. God, there's just I can't wait to get stuck into it again. But the other thing, I guess, where I'm trying to sort of drive you a little bit, because this struck me, and you must have thought about it. You're bringing this awareness on a podcast, but this could turn into something a lot bigger. Could you ever see yourself, maybe in years to come, maybe not the immediate future, as someone who, if things like what you're doing and Erin Pride are doing and others doesn't catch fire enough, could you see yourself taking up the mantle of being a spokesperson and really trying to push this help that you're giving in a small way now onto a much bigger platform?
Yeah. Absolutely. One thing I like to say a lot about my work, especially regarding the podcast, is that I'm talking about something that people would only appreciate 5 years from now. And I think a lot of what we do tends to be that way. So, for example, I would love to one day build a product that will be enjoyed by performers and artists alike, but probably only appreciated 10 years later. You know what I mean? So for sure, I think I'm already sort of an ambassador for the wider ecosystem of dance, let's say, or performing arts, because the things that I am talking about really always ushering in awareness, right? In that way, I'm my own spokesperson, or by default, I am a spokesperson for the industry. And thankfully, people like you as well, who have given me great reception, wonderful feedback, saying that, yeah, like, we need more people like this, leaders who are not afraid to pioneer a certain channel of communication, a certain domain of knowledge, and are probably okay with it only being appreciated 5 years from now. I think a lot of the geniuses of the world never had instant gratification at the top of their list, but I'm going to build a product like Steve Jobs probably did, like, for 10 years later. And when, probably when Zoom was created, nobody knew what the heck that was for. And then suddenly Zoom has become the number one product for this because of the pandemic, right? So anything could happen in the future. You just have to be prepared for it, So I do definitely hope to prepare my community better for it. And as a result, myself, for sure, being the main beneficiary of my own information.
Yeah. I lost my train of thought. Don't worry, I'll edit that out. I totally lost my train of thought. Because my mind, it's not even so much that I lost my train of thought. It's just that I can just see so much potential for what you're doing. And also, because of the way my mind works, because it just never stops spinning. And to be honest, I'll tell you, it's exhausting, really. But also, that's what got me and my business through the pandemic as well. But that's a story maybe for a different show or another time. But it's so translatable to, I can think of at least a dozen other industries where this type of education is completely overlooked. And it means that people are either left to fend for themselves and they're almost allowed to fail. And that's seen as failure in its purest sense, right? In that, from that really negative human kind of way. You're a complete loser, you didn't make it, you're on the scrap heap, you're not worthy, right? Or they've actually got to the end of the road in whatever it was they were doing, and then they've managed to find a role selling a product, service, whatever, starting a business out of it. But because they've not had any of that business training, they've got no idea about how to run a business, accounts, finances, customer service, marketing, and so on. They do it really, really badly. And then they give themselves and their wider industry a bad reputation. So an immediate obvious example is the building industry. Like builders, a lot of builders are actually crap at building things. But you can even have builders who are actually really good at building things, and they'll build you, say, the most beautiful house. But when it comes to running a business and everything that goes along with that, they're absolutely crap at it. And it's not necessarily because they're bad people. It's because nobody showed them how.
Yep.
There is an argument to say, well, they could have actually bothered to take the time to learn.
Exactly.
But,
yeah.
So again, take the builder as an example. If they're going to like a master craftsman school or college or whatever to learn how to lay bricks or whatever it is, the same as a dancer goes to dance academy, and so on and so forth, it would be great if those institutions integrated a bit of the kind. What I'm saying, Jason, is basically in 20 years' time, I expect to see the Jason Yap Academy for dance and entrepreneurship.
Thank you for that.
Right,
yeah.
in every single country across the world.
Yeah.
Right, no dancer left behind.
Yes.
No performer left behind.
Hey, that's inspirational. Thank you for cracking that, opening that can of worms, because I'm always constantly looking for ideas as to how to progress my own business or my own brand. But just to add on to what you said, so a very close analogy to our industry is that a lot of the bosses or a lot of the leaders in our industry were incredible artists but horrible bosses. Yeah, and I think it's quite similar to maybe even a corporate setting where the natural line of ascendancy is just work your way up the ladder without having a real contribution to your eventual job. So you might become, it's just natural course that you become a manager, and managers get paid more and are ranked higher, but you were doing completely something else when you were not a manager yet. But because they had to promote you, they had to give you a managerial job. So I do not know why there isn't a chief executive clerk or something like that. Because if you're a clerk, then do the clerk stuff that are really good. But you have to become the chief executive officer and manage other clerks. And because you do not have that training or awareness, then you become a horrible boss. So that happens a lot as well in my industry. I've had inroads with a lot of these people myself, and I go, why are they the bosses of our industry and giving us a bad rap? Not because they are horrible at the artistic stuff, but the managerial stuff instead, or the entrepreneurial stuff, as you've mentioned, and just everything else they did not bother to care about before they had to transition to the afterlife, air quotes,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I feel like we could talk and talk and talk, but I appreciate that we're kind of getting to the end of our time together today, but I really have a feeling you and I are going to collaborate in some way, shape or form again in the near future.
Absolutely.
And I'd love to have you back on at some point sooner rather than later, actually. I honestly could talk about this all day. Jason, aside from the podcast, which again I'm going to bang on about again in a second, where can people find you online and offline? If you're listening in Slovakia, which I believe one person does.
I will usually direct everyone to my podcast website, which is called the backgrounddancer.com. So background dancer with 2 Ds. Just that, backgrounddancer.com. All my social media links are there. I'm on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Pinterest. You'll mostly find the podcast profiles, but then, you'll also find my individual profiles there. You can find me on Instagram most of the time at Jason, Liel, Jason Leal, or Facebook, which is Jason Michael Yap, YAP. So those are the the primary ones.
Brilliant. I'll make sure that I have your main links in the show notes for everybody to click on and follow you. Make sure you do it, guys and girls. Thank you so much, Jason. Really, I really appreciate you joining me today, and I can't wait to actually listen back to this. And I'm sure everyone listening's going to get so much out of it. Thank you all so much for joining Jason and I today. If you have a passion for the performing arts and you've got any interest in business and entrepreneurship, I cannot recommend Jason's podcast, The Background Dancer, enough. Please do go check it out wherever you like to get your shows. That's it for another week. As always, if you're liking the show, please give us a rating and review if your favoured podcast platform allows. It really helps new listeners to find the show. It helps us to grow, and who knows, you might just bring someone to the show who might really need us at this time in their life. Also remember, sharing is caring, and Tailoring Talk is evolving into a show where my guests and I share stories with a view to trying to help people and make the world a slightly better place. So do share us with your family, friends and colleagues. Good luck, England, and I hope by the time this goes out, they have actually brought the Euro 2020 trophy home. Whatever you got up to on Cup final evening, I hope you and yours had a wonderful time. Take care, be good to each other, and I can't wait for you to join me on the next one.